All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we will now jump into the second part of the video, which is about planning out your essay. So how do I plan for my essay before I write the essay? This is a necessary step to take. Before you cook the burger, you need to prepare your ingredients and make sure that they are of quality. So in this video, we are going to do just that. All right, so before you write your essay, you need to have an idea. You need to have an argument first. It means that you must decide which is your important factor, what is your stand before you start writing the essay. Because if you just freestyle your essay, you are going to find out that maybe you write halfway and then you realize, hey, actually my stand is wrong. And then you have to restart. This is a huge time waster, and you are definitely going to see your grades plunge if you do this. So let's go into planning an essay. All right. So I'm pretty sure many of you here are looking at the screen, looking like caveman SpongeBob here. How do you start planning an essay? Well, worry not, people. We are going to do it step by step. All right. So in your handout, or you can refer to what you have in front of you right here, is how to plan for a geography essay. What I want you to take note of is this. The secret to making a good burger is actually good planning. Good planning is a secret formula for a good essay. So what I have here is a 5-step method for you to take to plan an essay. Do not skip this step. These steps apply to any essay, any geography essay that you are doing, and you can use this thinking process. So let's do it step by step. Okay, people? All right. Let's say in your exam, you get this question. Distance from the sea is the most important factor in influencing the temperature of a location. How far do you agree with the statement? Support your answers with relevant example. Your first step is to just read the question. Your second step is you need to understand what the question is asking for. And to do this, I suggest that you annotate the question. So what do I mean by annotation? So in this question, you are given a given factor. In every question, you're given a given factor. So in this question, distance from the sea is the given factor. And then they ask you, is the most important factor in influencing the temperature of a location? So basically what this question is asking for is they are asking you, is distance from the sea the most important factor when affecting the temperature of a location? So meaning, let's say, I have 2 different locations. Is it distance from the sea that affects or determines the temperature of the place, or is it some other factor? So you have learned many factors that affect temperature of locations. You have to decide which factor is the most important. But worry not, I will take you through this step by step. So just follow along. All right. So step 2 is unpack the question. You are going to annotate and you're going to find out what you are required to evaluate. Evaluation means what are you required to judge? And in this case, we have already discussed, we actually have to judge whether compared to other factors such as altitude, latitude, nature of surfaces, is it distance from the sea that determines how hot or how cool a location is? I'm pretty sure in your head right now, you are thinking hard about which factor is the most important. That is good. Now we will go to the next step. Like what I have mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, you always have to talk about the given factor. The factor given in this question is distance from the sea. So one of your patties have to be about distance from the sea. And then remember, you have to write 2 other factors. So in total, 3 patties. 1 patty is distance from the sea. What are my other 2 patties about? All right. For my G2 students, you only have to make 2 patties. That means you will talk about distance from the sea and you will talk about 1 other factor. But for my G3 students, you all need to write 3 body paragraphs, meaning 3 patties. So other factors that I can include in my essay are latitude and altitude. So basically in my essay, I'm going to argue, is it latitude, is it altitude, or is it distance from the sea that is the most important factor in determining the temperature or how hot or how cold a location is. All right, step number 5, you will need to start thinking. What is your argument? Are you going to agree or are you going to disagree with the statement? All right. In this case, I am going to stop you here because many of you are now thinking, wait, I already have my 3 factors, but how do I decide which is the most important? Well, my dear students, you have to make an evaluation. All right. So remember, G2, you have to write only about 2 factors, G3, 3 factors. So how do you decide? I'm going to answer that question right now. Okay, I want you to imagine that right here, you have a weighing scale. The most important factor will be the one that is the heaviest. The less important factors are going to be the one on the lighter side. All right. So for example, an argument can be when you're trying to judge whether you're trying to judge which is the most important factor, it can look something like this. All right. You can argue that distance from the sea is the most important, and then altitude and latitude are less important. So you need to prove why distance from the sea is the most important and why these two are less important. What I want you to take note of is this. There is no correct essay. It depends on how you argue for your most important factor. All right. So your argument, based on whatever criteria that you've shown that we will explore later, will determine whether your essay makes sense or not, whether it is convincing or not. So this is one way that you can write an essay. So let's say this is the most important factor, so it will go here. Alternatively, I can also do this. Let's say I change my mind. I want to do latitude is the most important factor, and these two are my less important factor. Also can. It depends on how you argue, how you evaluate. All right. So I'm pretty sure that many of you are now thinking, what are evaluations? How can I actually prove whether something is more important or less important? Basically, evaluation refers to the act of judging or rating something based on the evaluative criteria. I know this is a lot of very difficult words. Don't worry, I will unpack this with you. All right. So basically, I want you to imagine that you are judging something. Let's say you are judging a movie, and then you are trying to decide, is this the best movie out there? You will have to decide based on a criteria. Or is this the best bubble tea brand? You will have to judge it based on a criteria. This criteria might be price. This criteria might be taste. This criteria might be the number of cups of bubble tea that they sell every day. To carry out evaluations, you need to use evaluative criteria. I will share some with you later that you can use in your essay. So basically, you guys are doing evaluations every day. This is not something new to all of you. For example, your friend asks you, Pokka Ice Lemon Tea is the best soft drink. I can say that I agree because it is the best tasting drink. So taste is an evaluative criteria that I use to compare Pokka Ice Lemon Tea to any other drinks out there. Let's say that your friend asks you, dengue is more dangerous than COVID-19. Do you agree? Maybe you can say that I disagree. COVID-19 is more dangerous. So how do you prove your point? You can use, for example, number of deaths. All right. So for example, COVID-19 has killed millions or hundreds and thousands of people, but has dengue killed as many people? That is an evaluative criteria. That is how you're judging whether COVID-19 or dengue is more dangerous. Next one is this. Marvel is better than DC. Do you agree? All right. For my Marvel fans out there, I agree with you. Marvel is better. And how do you judge? Maybe I can say that Marvel makes better movies. Marvel superheroes are cooler. That is how I judge and agree or disagree with this statement. All right. Okay. So let's try and do a bit of evaluation here using an everyday example. Let's say your friend says, Pokka Ice Lemon Tea is the best soft drink. How far do you agree with the statement? Support your answer with relevant examples. So in this question, we are being asked to judge whether Pokka Ice Lemon Tea is the best drink. But how can we decide whether it's the best drink or not? Because if you ask someone the word best, they will tell you best in taste, best in packaging, best in price. Very different. So you need to decide in your essay, how are you determining best? So what are some evaluative criteria, or how are you going to judge whether it's the best soft drink? So for example, let's say I have these 3 drinks in front of you representing the 3 factors. All right. I have Pokka Ice Lemon Tea. I have Prime Lemon Lime. and then I have Fanta grape. Out of these three drinks, how can we judge which is the best drink? All right. I'm going to assume right here, let's assume that all of us are Pokka Ice Lemon Tea lovers. How can we prove that Pokka Ice Lemon Tea is better than these two other drinks? So these are some sample evaluative criteria or how you can judge these drinks based on. You can judge based on taste. You can judge by number of sales, or you can even come up with an evaluative criteria of your own. Over here, I will use number of influencers that promote it. All right. So you will need to decide which is the most appropriate evaluative criteria for your argument. For example, I will say taste. Out of these three drinks, Pokka Ice Lemon Tea is the best tasting. Therefore, I would say that it is the best soft drink. However, I want you to take note of this. Let's compare, let's use a different evaluative criteria. Let's say number of influencers that promote it. If I were to compare these three drinks, I have never seen an influencer promote Pokka Ice Lemon Tea, however, or Fanta Grape. However, we all know that Prime is actually endorsed by so many influencers. So in this case, if I were to use evaluative criteria 3, number of influencers, Prime hydration drink will then become the best soft drink. So you can see, based on how you are judging it, different drinks can become the best drinks. So you will have to decide which one you want to use for your essay and then make a case for your argument. All right, so let's say I use number of sales and it is proven, let's say, that Pokka Ice Lemon Tea has sold the most number of drinks in the world. So maybe my evaluation, which will be in my petty paragraph or in my bottom bun paragraph, will be like, Pokka Ice Lemon Tea is the best soft drink as it surpasses or it exceeds all other drinks in terms of sales. This shows that it is the most popular drink. Since the number of units sold is the highest, no other soft drink compares to it in terms of sales, and hence that proves that it is the best. So you see that in my evaluation, I have said that Pokka Ice Lemon Tea has sold the most number of units, and the other drinks do not catch up to Pokka Ice Lemon Tea. So this proves that indeed it is the most popular and it is the best soft drink out there. So this is just an example of how to do an evaluation. But I want you to take note of this. When we're writing geography essay, it's not like an English essay that you can evaluate in any way that you want. There are specific evaluative criteria that we can use to judge, evaluate in geography. So I'm going to give to you 4 different evaluative criteria that you can use in your essay. Which one you choose depends on what essay you're trying to answer and what your chosen point is. So let's take a look. All right. So basically, what I want you to take note of is this. Your evaluation must convince your readers to believe in whatever agreement or disagreement that you are putting forward. So the first evaluative criteria that I have for you is environment. So what you will notice is you have actually learned this in term 1, environment, space, place, scale, etc. Our first evaluative criteria is environment, which is also known as cause and effect. All right. For example, how do you actually use this evaluative criteria? All right. So an example will be, let's say, you will ask yourself these guiding questions. So these guiding questions are here to help you decide let's say you're using this evaluative criteria, how do you use it? You use the guiding questions. All right. So usually when we are trying to determine whether something is more important or more serious, etc., the cause is more important than the effect. For example, let's take a look at this scenario. I eat a lot of nuggets and then I become fat. So which one is more important here? Me eating the nuggets or me becoming fat? Or me gaining weight? Basically, I want you to think about this. If I never ate the nuggets in the first place, would I have gained the weight? The answer is no. So in this case, the more important factor is the eating of nuggets and not so much about the gaining of weight. So you have to ask yourself, does one factor cause another factor? Or does one factor affect the extent of another factor? Which factor is a cause and which is an effect? From the top of my head, I can think about it this way. If let's say I'm comparing latitude with altitude, which one is more important? I want you to think about it this way. Let's say that I have a mountain in Singapore. Would the temperature actually go down to negative degrees Celsius? I think not, because of Singapore's location at the equator. It is essentially very hot. So how low the temperature can go on top of being affected by altitude actually is dependent on the latitude based on where you're located at in the world. All right. So in this case, latitude is more important than altitude. All right. That's just one possible way to think about it. All right, next up is scale. I'm pretty sure many of you are familiar with scale. Scale actually refers to the size of an event or phenomenon, how big of an impact that it actually has. It refers to what you can use is, as we've learned in geography in everyday life, you can actually use global, regional, local scale to compare. So usually, I want you to think about it this way. When we're talking about COVID-19 versus dengue, which one has a larger scale of impact? All right. I'm pretty sure that many of you, having gone through the pandemic, would agree that COVID-19 is global in scale. However, dengue is regional in scale. So COVID-19 affects every country in the world, but dengue does not really affect every country in the world. And therefore, if we compare it this way, we can evaluate that COVID-19 is actually more dangerous as compared to dengue. In terms of geography, you can compare, let's say, latitude and altitude again. Latitude affects the entire world because it is basically where you're located at in the world. But when you're talking about altitude, it is local in scale because only the place with the mountain will actually experience the decrease in temperature that comes with an increasing altitude. Therefore, in terms of this, I would argue that latitude is more important than altitude because of the scale of influence that it has on temperature. All right. Next up, number 3. So just recap. First one is environment, cause and effect. Number 2 is scale. Number 3 is about time, duration, or frequency. Basically, you are talking about time. All right. So let's say when you're trying to evaluate using time, right? You will compare the duration of how long something lasts or how often it happens to determine whether to determine its importance or how influential it is. Some guiding questions you will ask yourself is which factor happens more frequently? How long does the factor take to show its effect? How long does the factor last? So if I were to compare in terms of geography now, latitude with distance from the sea. We know that distance from the sea affects temperatures in your summer and winter. So only 2 seasons. But on the other hand, latitude, we know that it affects temperature all year round. Like in Singapore, because of our location near the equator, our temperatures are hot all year round. All right. So we see that comparing to just summer and winter, all year round is a much more longer duration. And therefore, the factor that lasts longer usually is more important. All right. Okay. So now we're going to move on to number 4. Number 4 is you're comparing spaces. All right. So you're comparing spaces, let's say Singapore and London, in terms of things such as, you know, their mean annual temperature, level of development, preparedness, etc. So if you are trying to compare, let's say, distance from the sea. Let's say I want to use space to evaluate distance from the sea. My argument will go something like, distance from the sea doesn't really affect Singapore in terms of influencing temperature because we know that Singapore is hot all year round. And just because it is located near the sea, we don't see temperatures actually being affected that much. However, in London, or London is not near the sea. However, in Anchorage, for example, we see that because of its distance from the sea, it is affected by having warmer winters and cooler summers. So we see that the factor of distance from the sea is actually very space specific. Places near the equator are not really affected by distance from the sea, but places in higher latitudes are actually affected by distance from the sea more. Therefore, in this case, because it does not affect every place, we can say that distance from the sea is not as important as latitude, for example, which affects every place that is on the world. All right, so let's say this is step 5. So just remember that this is step 5. Deciding on your stand and briefly describe why your stand makes sense using an evaluative criteria. Let's say I use cause and effect or environment. I would generally say, remember, this is my argument. You can adopt whatever argument that you have as long as you're able to support it. All right. So I will say that I disagree with the statement that distance from the sea is the most important factor, because I personally think that latitude determines what kind of climate a location has, which then affects the temperature that they experience. For example, in Singapore, because we're in a tropical climate, we will never get temperatures below like 10 degrees Celsius. And this is a result of latitude. All right. However, distance from the sea and altitude, on the other hand, affect temperature that has been determined due to latitude. So for example, let's say a country is hot and then you have a mountain. Technically speaking, altitude will only have a slight effect, because let's say you have a 1,000 meter mountain. The temperature will go down by 6.5 degrees Celsius. But if your sea level temperature is 30 degrees Celsius, the top of the mountain will only be 24 degrees Celsius. So in this sense, latitude is the cause that determines the temperature, but altitude and distance from the sea do minor, very small changes to temperature. And therefore, I disagree that distance from the sea is most important, because I feel that latitude is more important. All right, so this might be a little bit hard to grasp. Remember to just rewind the video, reduce the speed if you need to just understand this idea of evaluation. Evaluations are very important. They determine whether your essay is good or bad. So please make sure you understand this evaluation before you move on to the next part. All right, so just now I used cause and effect. What if I change my mind and then I want to argue in terms of scale instead? I would disagree and say that the effect of latitude is global and your location north and south of the equator determines your temperature. However, altitude and distance from the sea are localized. So meaning that you have to be places near the sea, or you have to be a place near mountain in order for you to see the effects that it has on temperature. So therefore, I argue that if something affects temperature on a global scale, it is much more important than a factor that affects only the local scale. So I would argue for latitude in this case. So what I want you to take note of is this. I can use any of the 4 evaluative criteria. It depends on your argument and how you are going to argue it. All right. The possibilities are endless. It depends on your evaluative criteria, and the evaluative criteria will affect your argument. So please make sure you understand the 4 different evaluative criteria that we have explored in this video. All right. Now that you have a plan, you can proceed with learning how to write each part, which is the more easy process as compared to understanding evaluation and planning your essay. So the other videos are going to be much shorter. Yeah, they're going to be a breeze to understand. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Remember to rewind the video and pause if you need to just digest these ideas. I'll see you guys in the next one.